some other topics still under belonging. So yeah, bear with us. We have Ruth back with us and Anita, and then two new faces. They'll introduce themselves in a minute, but we thought to touch on vulnerability because it's one of those topics that's very overlooked. So yeah, we're just gonna talk about it and hope that it gives you an insight to different perspectives and stuff.
Yes, and I guess to start off, we'll start with a word of prayer, and Melissa is going to lead us into the prayer. So let's see.
Heavenly Father, we come before you. We thank you for this wonderful day. We thank you for this fellowship amongst our friends. Jehovah Nissi, we welcome you in this place. We welcome you to come and dwell amongst us. Father Lord, the words we're going to discuss, the topics we're going to talk about, may they be building blocks in our lives. May they enter our hearts and make us better people. For those who are watching, may they learn something from this session. Father Lord, I also continue to pray for these charts the girls have created. May they be a building block for people's lives. May they touch people. May they encourage them to be their better selves. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thanks. We'll have a new face, as Molly has already mentioned. Would you like to let the crowd, maybe some of us, know who you are?
Hello, my name is Fatah Dabre.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Melissa Irangaviye.
Oh, is that how you say it?
Oh, I've been saying it
Irangaviye.
I've been saying it wrong my whole life.
How are you saying it, sis?
Hey, let's not do that. Focus.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, vulnerability. What is it and why is it so important? And Molly already mentioned that today we are talking about vulnerability as a sub-theme of belonging. So what makes vulnerability so linked to our sense of belonging? And I guess it's only fair if we can start with the question, what would you say yourself makes you vulnerable? If you were to say, I'm vulnerable at this very moment, what would that mean? So it's open to the floor. I'm gonna have to choose. Buddy. Buddy, would you like to start?
Well, it's to say you are vulnerable in like probably it's probably like based on what situation you find yourself in, or company, or where you find yourself in. But vulnerability has this. It's just, for me, I feel like it's when you surrender yourself to your inner being without disregarding what anyone would think about what you do or how you look or what you say. When you surrendered yourself to your inner being. So if you are born with one leg, you don't really mind mingling with people with two legs, because you know there's something within you that goes past what they can see physically in you. So I think for me that's what vulnerability, to be vulnerable, means.
Wow.
I agree with you. Like Brene Brown talks about it, I relate to it in that sense as well. Allowing myself to be seen, like from the inside to the outside, if that makes sense. So I'm not basically worried about someone's response to whatever I have to say, how I have to present myself. I'm just putting myself out there with basically taking that risk without having to worry about what outcome is.
Interesting. It was probably going to be the same, but slightly different in the sense that it's trusting. I'm tempted to use this word. It's trusting that what you say to somebody else has much meaning to them as much as it does to you. That's how I look at it.
I think for me, vulnerability means, okay, for me to feel vulnerable, I have to feel safe. Like you've said, allowing myself to be seen in the sense that I'm like, this is who I am fully with no reservations. This is who I am, and nothing is being held back, but also feeling safe to do so, because like you said, you have to feel like that other person will take in what you have to say and not use it against you. I think for me, feeling safe and knowing that I can just be me in my most raw sense or state, and not feel like you're going to use whatever I say or whatever I share against me in the time to come.
For me, vulnerability is stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm a person, I try to avoid it if I can. It's like something I try to avoid like all the time. So like for me, pretty much everyone has basically mentioned, you mentioned trust, you mentioned being able, for me, I view vulnerability as me being completely honest with myself as well with the other person, trusting them to like see me at my most lowest, at my most, I guess, I don't know what word to use, but like when I'm vulnerable, I see it in the sense of like, I'm just there like all shields down, all guards down, that I am trusting that person for them to see me in that way. It's also like, I am comfortable for us to have that vulnerable relationship, because like I can show them my true self, and I expect the same from them.
Facts.
That's so interesting point. I actually want to draw us back to more of what Fadi and Ruth said. You mentioned that for you it's feeling like you're in a safe space, and then Fadi mentions that it depends with the area, right? So does that mean that there is a certain time, context, setting that you can only be vulnerable in, or you can, let me just leave the question there. Does it mean that you can be only vulnerable in certain areas where you feel safe?
I would say 100%, because the last thing, well, I've learned like from the past, you can't always give every piece of yourself to everybody. So you can only be vulnerable with people that embrace that and reciprocate. Like she said, it's given back. My problem is there's danger in being vulnerable with the wrong people. So that's why, like he said, time and place is everything. Because you find that you get yourself vulnerable with somebody, and they leave your life, you're like, I shouldn't have told you that.
You don't deserve that.
Triggered. They didn't deserve to know me like that. You know,
like I want it back. Give me back my vulnerability.
You wish you could have taken the moment back.
What she said.
Like just throwing on what Ruth said as well. You said like in a specific environment with specific people. I feel like vulnerability has layers and levels. So for example, for me, like I'll just give an example. Like if I was to go like tree climbing or like walking, like we've all had like Valley of the Giants, like walking on treetops. Like I have an immense fear of heights, and that's a level of vulnerability. But if I was to go in a group of friends, some that I'm close with and some I'm acquainted, it's like something I'm capable. I'm able to become vulnerable in that moment and climb those trees, even though I will be scared. So there's that. I feel like depending on how vulnerable or the levels of vulnerability or what you're sharing in that moment, it depends on with the people you're with. Because like there's some parts about yourself, as Ruth said, you regret sharing with someone. There's some parts of yourself you can only share with people you have a certain intimate relationship with, people who are extremely close to you. And there's some stuff that you are uncomfortable with that do put you a little bit vulnerable, but you can do it in people who you're not as close with. That's what I think.
So sorry, I have a question for you too. So what creates the boundaries to vulnerability, and does trust come first before vulnerability, or is it the other way around?
Question.
I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think God has put me in situations where I had to be vulnerable for somebody else's sake, not my own.
Yeah.
So sometimes God uses you and your vulnerability to help somebody, to encourage them. So it's not to say that you can only do it with specific people, but I think within yourself emotionally, there comes a balance within you where you're like, yeah, this is needed for somebody else's benefit, or this is needed for that connection to strengthen. Just like in a relationship, even friendships, you only get to like a certain point in the relationship or the friendship where you start sharing things. At first, it's all fun and games. And then as it progresses, that's when things start coming up and you start sharing. So I think it's a progression. And with some people, it's a one-time thing for that moment where they probably need you and God is using you, I would say.
I mean, coming back to your question in terms of trust and being vulnerable, because we're talking about vulnerability, because like as I use the word innate. So everyone is born, came through this world with their sense of what vulnerability is. But the moment the person moves into the world, there are social filters. So social filters would determine where and when will they be able to open up, to feel vulnerable. So for instance, like you talk about trust and vulnerability, it depends on, for most people, for them to be able to feel vulnerable, they have to trust that you're going to accept them for whatever they are showing you they have. So for example, let's say at a home level, for instance, if you are born in a Christian home and you figure out, like somewhere in your life you realize that, I like girls, I like boys. Unless your parents build up a certain degree of trust that we love you unconditionally, we will, regardless of who you are, we will still love you. You will not go to them and tell them. So because of these social filters, so I mean sometimes people don't deliberately numb what makes them vulnerable, but they look at the social filters around them. They're like, ooh, if I open up and be vulnerable to people like this, I'm just going to be a social outcast. So they pretty much will they will never surrender themselves to their true self, like, until they find that comfort environment and very trusting environment where they feel like they can voice out, be themselves and be vulnerable, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, this is who they are. I think that's.
I have a question.
I had another question, but you go first.
Yeah, same, but
my mind just works in so many mysterious ways. Only God knows at this point. We all know that you can be vulnerable with God, right? And
yes.
That's necessary. That's beautiful. That's the safest space. But this is to all of you. How does vulnerability look to you? How do you get vulnerable with yourself? And is it possible to do so?
Oh yes, next question.
Because I want to know.
Actually, I had a statement in relation to that. But anyways, yes, you can. My answer to that question is yes, you can. I would say that from a personal experience, like earlier on, at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I found myself battling a lot of emotions, from grief, rejection, and all these things coming in. And I realized that I was actually fighting with vulnerability. I wasn't allowing myself to be vulnerable because I was like, no, but then people perceive me as weak, or you're going through these. I mean, people are used to seeing me handling my things. So how can they find me in a position where I'm breaking down and stuff? For me, that was just unacceptable until when I surrendered. And when I surrendered into my relationship with God. And I was like, why is it that I'm fighting with vulnerability just in a social setting, but then I am required to be vulnerable to actually experience God? You know what I mean? So for me, I came to understand it fully when I surrendered to God. And surrender is another word that people normally relate to weakness. When you surrender, that means in war. Surrendering means being, you've given up or you've lost the battle. So for me, I was like, wait a minute, I'm surrendering and I am actually vulnerable to God, and I felt at peace. But I was like, why is it that I was battling it? And I was like, you know, all these things. I feel I feel shamed and stuff. But then when I'm like in front of God, I'm like, wait, I feel at peace. I feel empowered, which is the actual opposite of what I had in mind in relation to vulnerability and surrender. So yes, you can be vulnerable to yourself, but I think consciously you have to understand that it is not related to to weakness, and if someone perceives you as vulnerable, it doesn't really mean anything. At the end of the day, it's about you and what you're experiencing, because through that you gain strength, and through that you actually come out on the other side feeling stronger and better. That was just what I experienced, but it could be different for other people. But yes, you can be vulnerable to yourself.
For me, like, especially what Ruth said with being vulnerable before God, like, I first, you know, like, I feel like it's quite like a power shift. You know, most of the time we're taught about how God has made us to, like, He's given us strength to overcome anything that we go through. So, like, initially for me, it's been like a learning curve. Like, initially I just always felt like, oh, you know, like, no matter what emotion I'm battling, no matter what I'm going through, I'm just like, oh, He's given me the power to conquer this. Like, I'm saying that to myself, but I was sort of inhibiting myself from being like vulnerable before Him. Like, I would be praying for Him, you know, to, you know, give me the strength to go through it, but never really like pray for me to like break down before Him, like just have that building process. I was always like more of like, oh, just give me strength to carry through, like just pass through it, sort of like, you know, just brush forward through it. But as Molly said, like, you feel empowered when you really go before God. Like, you know, I remember like something actually Ruth told me. She was like, you know, sometimes it's okay to go to God and be like, God, like, I'm mad at you, and you know, I don't, like, you know, she's like, you know, sometimes you let Him see all your emotions, you know, like, you just be like, I feel like this and that. And that's the beauty of that, like, you know, the beauty of like being completely honest with God. It teaches you to be honest with yourself as well, because there's sometimes, like, you know, you have all these emotions and you're like, oh, I have to be strong, you know, you know, I have to be strong, I have to be there for my friends, I have to be, you know, but like through it all, like, you're really lying to yourself saying, oh, I'm strong, this and that, because you haven't dealt with it. So I feel like, yes, it's like you can be vulnerable in front of God and yourself, and I think it's actually something really important, like, to do.
Wow, that's so interesting. I think would like to hear from a man's perspective. We want to hear the question that we've just been racing through. Why is it men are not associated with, cannot be found associating with the term vulnerability? And
I mean, it's like, I mean, what I was saying before, in terms of the social filters. So for example, I mean, you spoke about the way I see it in terms of being vulnerable in front of, like, in front of God, for instance. But as a man, like, if you're growing up, you've been told, like, you know, men don't cry. Number one, it's like you're built up to be like kind of like a strong person, like a protector, somebody like that can go through like every situation and still be able to hold it together for other people. So you are basically like built to be very stoic in that sense. But then they're neglecting the fact that you also, as a man, you have like a certain emotional needs. But this is where the social filters come in. You cannot feel vulnerable as a man in front of other men or even women, because you appear weak. So like you women will say, I want him to come with confidence. But if he comes to you like this, you're like, ah. But if he comes like this, chest out, you're like, this is what I want. So these are, so basically, no, it's that is very different. It's very different. But what we're talking about is the predominant in society. This is why, who has told humanity that women cannot go to war? Men are the people who are always pushed to go to war. Did God send a messenger to come and tell humanity that let men only go to war? No. But if you look at the whole history, men are always at the front line of war. But what is not visible when they are put forward to go and do those things, when they get broken and come home, their wives have to fix them. But that is not been very physical for them to see. So it's because of this sort of social facet, like I said, until as a man you have to surrender to your inner self to be like, okay, no, wait a minute. Like I also have emotions. I'm vulnerable. Sometimes I need some sort of help from other people. But then when you come to that tense, then that is when you will begin to go through those sort of whatever situation you will have to go through to feel vulnerable and also be able to have that sort of feeling of being yourself. But if you don't, and most people go through life, especially most men go through life without experiencing it because they are constantly being reminded, no, you're a man, you can do this, you're a man, you can do this, you're a man, you can do this. And it becomes like, that's why they kill themselves more than women.
Yeah.
Because they get to a point that like, wait a minute, I'm done. Like this problem, like, I don't want to go in front of a counselor, for instance, and feel vulnerable and pour out my heart to them. I can't go to my wife because then she'll look at, this was not the man I married. I don't want to go to my children because they want to see a Superman. I don't want to go to my parents because they will raise you to be strong. What else do I have to do? Then they kill themselves.
So my question is in relation to that, what can be done for men to feel like it's okay to open up, it's okay to express your emotions? Because I feel like right now we are experiencing life with a lot of men in our generation who are really terrible at expressing their emotions. If I want to say it blankly, they're really bad at expressing their emotions, and what they see as expressing emotions is not what we see. We're like, well, I want you to give me more, and the only time you see a guy being vulnerable, it's very beautiful, but they don't see it like that. So what can be done? Is it like something that women can do in a way they perceive men, or is it a society kind
Well,
of?
there are solutions to these sort of problems, but they're very tough solutions. So what you're talking about basically is to completely transform our social contract with each other. So mothers have to teach men that it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel vulnerable, whatever. However, there's another extreme. The extreme is that it's a very fine line. A man that feels very weak in a certain state of his life or in an environment can be very dangerous, man. Because now there's a driving force in him to want to feel what it is to be a man. So you will see like men that find themselves in a weak, mostly, let's say for instance, abusers tend to be weak, kind of, that they fall into that class. Let's say maybe like a rapist, for instance, can fall into that kind of class of men. But it has to be collectively situated at the home level. The mothers do their part, and when they walk into life, also life provides them with enough avenues to be able to feel these emotions and to be vulnerable. But I mean, if you look at it in this society, they are starting to do that, but not in our society. Our society is actually basic, but in this society, like you will see, if you open TV, they try to encourage men to speak, and they even want them to speak to their minds. And there's a lot of advertisement out there encouraging men to speak if they are going through something or just to feel vulnerable. And vulnerability should not be a sign of weakness, you know. And also that you can be strong but yet vulnerable. They're not enemies of each other. But then so it has to be the collective effort from the home to the society, and it's going to take. I feel like it's going to take a while to get there.
I think you're right, it would mean overhauling the whole system, from, like you said, the home environment to society to church to like a lot of things. And I think it also comes to a point where even in their own friendships, men don't talk about stuff.
That's true.
They just breeze through things. So I think you're right, it would take a whole lot more than we think. But I think as women, I've found that in situations where I speak life into a man, they feel very uncomfortable. And I'm talking about the men in my life, my guy friends, my partner, my brother, my own uncles, my own dad. It's very foreign to them. when I say, I'm proud of you for being honest about how you feel, and I want you to feel that way and be comfortable in it, sit in it, and be okay with feeling what you're feeling. And I think in my relationship, it's taken a lot of time to get us to a point where we are able to cry and move on.
Yeah.
And it took me proving myself to that person to say, I love you and I want what's best for you. But it also took a lot of patience with me to say, I'm gonna have to work to prove myself to you. Not emotional labor, that's another thing. I'm not saying, you have to have that emotional labor, but I'm saying it takes a lot of putting yourself out there and saying, I want you to trust me because I want what's best for you. But even in friendships, it's like that. There's certain friends of mine that don't want to talk about friendships, and that don't want to talk about vulnerability at all. And it's hard because one of my closest friends, went through a breakup and she disappeared. I'm talking like I couldn't even I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So it was only until I saw her, I'm like, hey, what happened? Like, you disappeared for like a good 3 months. She's like, oh, me and this person broke up, and it's done. I feel okay now. And I'm like, wow. I was not part of the process.
Yeah.
So I feel like I failed as a friend because I'm like, well, are you okay? What happened? Like, I feel distant from you. Like, did I do my part? Did you feel alone? Like, you're not alone. So I think it's just one of those things where it can be tricky, but the bottom line is we ought to remind ourselves that we need to be kind to ourselves first. If you are kind enough and honest with yourself to allow yourself to feel certain things, I think you can then embrace it and pour it out onto other people.
Awesome.
Sorry. For me, I wanted to draw a bit more from like what you both said, but I think as well with like vulnerability, like it's not a one size fits all. Like each individual, like they have their own way of dealing with their vulnerabilities. So example, like what I was talking about, able to do, especially with men having it to come from like the home level, and then like as they move through society, just having those safe spaces. But I also think like most people, like our own vulnerability terrifies us. Like we are so afraid of just being bare and open to our own selves, let alone to someone else. So especially in like a society that has been set in a way of men having to appear a certain way and women having to appear a certain way, it's like it is so easy to get caught in like the social norms that are expected, that we also have to understand like with vulnerability like comes healing, and we all go through different healing processes. So like for me, like I'm the kind of person, like I'm just like I'm like I'm always to my friends, like I'm here, like I want to be here for you, like I'm practically practically shoving myself down their throat. As you can see, like they can agree, like but for me it's because like it stems from a place of like I've just had that growing up, like my sister and I were like two peas in a pod. She's just literally been like there, like I'm getting whooped, she does something to get whooped with me, so like we're doing it together. So like basically what I'm trying to say, it's like it depends, like it depends on the person, it depends on the specific like relationship of that person. For example, I could be in a friendship, like all of us, we could be in a friendship, but the level of vulnerability I show to Ruth could be different to the level of vulnerability I show to Anita. And it all goes back to like how I feel when I'm with the person. We could all be receiving the same type of friendship, but it also depends, it goes back to like, it's another form of vulnerability, I guess, to how comfortable you can be with someone before you open up. So like as you would say, it's just like the whole trust. I feel like it takes a long time, it takes a while to build that safe environment, safe space for someone to just completely unwind, completely open up, like who they are to you. and like to open up who they are to themselves. Because sometimes like I find myself in this situation, like, you know, I'm just basically talking about like what I've been going through, what I'm feeling with friends, and I even surprise myself like speaking it out loud. I'm like, oh, so that was what that was, like, you know, like, yeah, because for me, what I've realized, like, especially like if I'm in uncomfortable situations, I remember like this was a lot, like when I'm at school and I'm like really crunching, like I'm time to study, like, you know, really focusing, and like I tend to be quite snappier, I tend to be a bit more like, you know, passive aggressive, and then like, you know, I'm just like, and then like when I'm just having a conversation like my best friend or anything like that at the time, and then they'll be like, so how have you been feeling? I'm like, honestly, like school's really kicking me out, and then I'll be like, that's why I've been being quite snappy a lot, that's why I'm really angry a lot. Like sometimes it takes being in that space for you to even realize your own vulnerability.
Yeah, that's so true. I just wanna, with your points rounded up together, I just wanna bring a certain point across that we've all had been to a new area, new setting. Most of us had to move here from Africa. Like, at what point, right, do you let someone in? Because remember, you haven't had time to build trust. You're not given enough time to build trust progressively for you to feel comfortable to express yourself. But at what point do you decide to let someone in? Because already that is an emotional risk. You're letting someone in into your life. So where does it start? Like, whose responsibility is it? Is it you, or is it the other person, or it takes two of you to make it work? Because what I'm getting at is you can never be vulnerable to people that don't look trustworthy.
Oh, girl.
That's what I'm getting at. But then, like, remember, you also don't know what you're seeing is, that's what it is. You know, what you're seeing is what it is, what it is what it seems. So at what point do you actually decide to be vulnerable, provided you don't know the people? You're going into a new school, probably even saying, the school sucks. You feel like you shouldn't be able to say that because it might work against you for some reason. But at what point do you decide to expose your feelings in a new environment? Anyone?
I mean, life, like life in its totality is a risk.
Yep.
It's like it's when the first day they take you to school, you might think that, oh yeah, when I get good grades, I'll be happy. You get good grades, nah.
Still not happy.
And then you're like, okay, maybe when I get to university and I finish university, I'll be happy. Nah, new challenges. Maybe when I get a job, nah. Maybe when I get married and have children.
Yeah.
So what essentially you're saying is when you, I mean, this is basically for me. It's like when I get into, regardless of the environment or whatever, I already know at the back of my mind that it is natural that things will not go the way I want them to be. But I will not know unless I try. So I'm willing to approach someone like in a bar, something like when I moved to Bunbury, I went out. I was like, there was no nightclub there. It was just pubs and full of white people and everything. I just got up one day and took my bag. I'm like, nah, man, I can't live in this place without getting to know people. So I traveled to the main city center, put the bike outside, went into a pub. I don't drink alcohol. Went into a pub and spoke to a couple of people. Just to cut the story short, from that, it took me to do that. A few weeks later, we formed a very small indoor soccer football team. But I didn't go to the bar expecting to meet people that are going to fulfill all my emotional or whatever needs now. But I know that like I might get up, and it actually happened. You know, like being the only black person, you're probably going to get somebody give you looks. But that's fine because life is not set up to go the way we want it to be. Because you have to understand that the way we want life to be, or the way we want things to turn up, is internal, right? But the way life actually works is external. So we can choose how we want to feel, or the level of risk we want to take to be able to get to people, to be able to open up to people, but we cannot determine the outcome of that.
Right.
So to be able to, as part of vulnerability, you have to accept that the outcome could be something you don't expect it to be.
Yeah,
But then
Totally.
you have to get in there.
100%.
So
Yeah,
I think
you're
That's it.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Going back to how I defined vulnerability, it's putting yourself out there to be seen, and you don't have that fear of, well, you have it, but you're not worried about the outcome, because like you said, the outcome can be what you expect or what you don't expect. So going back to your question, to what point do you allow yourself? You don't know. It's about you, because that's why it's called a risk. It's called a risk for a reason, that you're taking that risk. It's just like love. You're taking a leap of faith that the other person might feel the same way, and knowing that if they don't, it's still okay. You still express your feelings, and that's true. That's the reality of how you feel. So them feeling that way doesn't cancel out how you feel about them. So yeah, I'm going everywhere, but coming back to the point, again, allowing myself, it's like I'm going to relate it to a relationship with God. If we are to say that for us to be vulnerable, we need to know if we can trust the other person or not. There's people who don't know God, and they'll ask themselves, well, how do I know that I can trust him? Well, the thing is, you don't, if you don't know. So and that's the whole point of allowing yourself to be vulnerable to him or to people, because you don't know the outcome. You're just putting yourself out there. For me, it was putting myself out there, saying, and I had this thing in my mind that he does not heal what you don't reveal. So I was like, well, I have to take this leap of faith and reveal how I'm feeling, exactly like you said. God, I'm mad at you about this and that and that. Don't come saying, you know what, so I feel a certain way and stuff. Say it the way it is. That's what vulnerability is about. Just being authentic to your true being, and hoping that you have that hope that the outcome might be favorable to you, but if it's not, you still know that you're okay with it.
Wow. Just a bit more on that, like how you said that is it on you, on the other person, of both efforts. I think the more you spend time with people, like it slowly progresses. Like the level of trust, the level of vulnerability, it will slowly progress. Like for example, if you meet someone for the very first time, you just become acquainted. You may learn each other's name, where this person's from, where the other person's from. Then the next time you see each other, like you're slowly building up from that. So like for example, you said like about coming here, like you're new. Like I remember when we were first new in Australia, we had one family here that we knew, but like it took, going to like community events, like where you meet other people, like we'll meet other people from Burundi. I didn't necessarily like have to go. Actually, I didn't. My parents forced me. But in the sense of like, I can see that it's like sort of like creating an environment, like where you come, you gather people together. So I feel like if you meet like someone, let's say in a lecture room, you meet someone like, oh, maybe you have to do a group project with someone. Like you're not gonna be full blown vulnerable with that person. You're not gonna just tell them your deepest, darkest secrets. No, but I feel like it stems from that. It's, for example, it could be just as simple as saying, I actually have no total clue what we're doing in this assignment. And that connects you, because they will be, oh my god, same. Like, I actually thought you knew what you're doing. So, I think with vulnerability, it builds up over time. Like, it just comes from, like, littlest encounters. Like, as Fari said, like, he was like, it took me saying hi to those people in the pub, and then we created a soccer team. He didn't just go with the intention, I'm gonna go create a soccer team. It's just more of like, you know what, I'm a learning environment, I want to make some friends. It's like the same thing with vulnerability. You don't really go into like friendships, relationships, or any like setting with people thinking, oh yeah, I'm looking for someone I can share my deepest, darkest, no, it's just like, you meet someone, like you have some form of connection, and then you build from there on. So I think it's from both parties, whereas in, both being open, like, just to experience time and take it. Like, I also like, when it comes to vulnerability, don't force it. Like, this is actually my favorite, like, quote lately. It's like, if you have to force sis, leave.
Hey, please.
And
So
then,
watch your
and then this goes in all situations.
Yeah.
If you have to force like for people to see that you are trustworthy, leave.
That's
They're not seeing your trust.
That's really
If
true.
you have to force like friendship people, I beg go.
Please.
Make her go.
Please.
You know? So it's like with like that's the same thing, like you might be in a setting with people you've known for 10 years, but you're not able to open up because of how
Yeah.
it's structured.
Yeah.
Whereas when you meet someone for a week later, you are telling them how you were feeling in your childhood,
Yeah.
It depends on the connection. I think it depends on the time you
Yeah.
give it. Like,
Yeah.
so one thing I can definitely say after this whole long rant
Yeah.
is like to be patient and take it as it comes. Like, yeah.
Oh,
to
wow.
be patient.
I think for me, it's like I am one of those people that I test people. I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it's psychology, I don't know, but I test people in my life. If I cannot pick up the phone and say, hey, I need help, I'm stuck, I can't do A, B, C, D, E. Like she said, it's the little things. If I can't call you and say, hey, I'm stuck, I'm in the middle of A, B, C, D, E, and I can't get out, can you please help me? That's being vulnerable because you're allowing somebody to help you, to lift you up. So if you don't allow people to lift you up, some of the darkness that you feel is overwhelming you will overwhelm you because you're not letting people lift you up. So I think, like what she said, it takes time. There's certain people that I know, I love, they're my friends, we laugh about everything under the sun, but I can't go to them when I need help. It just, I love you, but I don't think you will have what it takes to uplift me when I need it, because like what she said, the setting, the environment of that relationship hasn't allowed me to feel safe and weak without feeling bad for it.
Okay.
And that's why have you noticed that some people, like, ask yourself this question: when was the last time you saw a specific friend crying? It's not to say crying is bad, but when have you last seen your friend being emotional and expressing emotion? To me, there's certain people that I know I can't go to them because we haven't unlocked that door yet.
Yeah.
It just hasn't happened. But I think, coming back to what you were saying, to what you were asking, I've like what she was saying, testing God, or not testing who he is, but testing him and what he can do. Because those are two different things. You can test him to say, God, I believe you can do it, and he'll prove it to you. Not who he is. His character is untestable. I think testing people in your life to see if they will extend that hand. Because if you want somebody to hold the door for you, you can ask. But you can't be mad if they don't, like you said. You can't be mad if they don't do what you think they should do. And it's just a two-way thing. But I think sometimes it takes you proving yourself or making yourself available for that conversation to start, like he did. He put himself out there, which is something that not all of us are brave enough to do. We wait. We sit and we wait for it to come. And sometimes that's how we miss our blessings in certain situations. But I think it's a two-way thing. It takes two to tango.
I think it does.
Yeah.
I wanted to say certain situations, but yeah, very interesting. I think, does anyone would like to add anything before we summarize everything?
Yeah, I think with religion, I have a different understanding as to how you deal with this sort of things, vulnerability compared to how you bring God in it. Because it's like, for me, I look at it, it's like there are certain things that is humanly possible, and we are designed in such a way that we have certain capabilities to do certain things, of course with the guidance of God. But if we find ourselves in a situation where things that are humanly possible, we take it to the doorstep of God, we begin to find ourselves in a trouble. So to put in an example, for instance, when people want rain, they will pray to God, right? But if there are no elements that make the rain fall. For instance, if you destroy all your trees,
Climate
you
change.
will never get rain, right? So I believe that I think that as human beings, I think it's very important for us to be able to recognize the things that is humanly possible. But while we go through that process, we can seek God's guidance is always has to be seek. It's not because God is going to do anything to do that particular thing that is humanly possible for you. But then of course, if you get up, if you have to walk to do it, and then you get up and you hit your head leg against something, then break your leg, you can't do it. So you need that guidance. But as a society, I think for in our society, this is the mixed up that comes through. So for instance, black people don't go to counselors, but they pray a lot.
Amen.
So that doesn't happen.
God will fix it.
Because you need to be able to understand that God didn't put you in this. God put you in this life. There are things that's why you have your own free will. You make your choices. So when you make your choices, and all choices have consequences. If they turn out good, but that good is your definition of what good is. If they turn out bad, so as the same your definition of what bad is, you have to deal with it. So, but you don't go into making those. Nobody goes into life every day saying, "God, should I choose red or black?" No, they choose. But when black comes trouble or red comes trouble, they go back to God. Doesn't work like that. You need to accept the consequences of your choices and then deal with it. So you have to be able to separate the two. And I think if you're able to do that, you tend to realize how the sort of things you are capable of doing and the sort of things that you might need to pick up your Bible and start praying.
And I like what you said, because God gives us free will and choice, because if he took it away, then it would be a dictatorship. It would be, this is what it is. I put you in this box, and God doesn't do that. You spoke to my life.
Goes back to what was it? God helps those who help themselves. You cannot be praying to pass an exam if you're not studying. So pick up your book, study, and then pray while you're at it. You know what I mean? It's what a lot of people do, like you're saying. Like, people really misunderstand it, especially people from our culture, and that's why our upbringing, we find that our brothers are finding it really hard, and sisters, but mainly brothers, finding it really hard to express emotions or like just allow themselves to be vulnerable to people out there. Not mainly because of that element of trust, but because your upbringing is so related to men are strong, men are protectors, men are this and stuff, that you don't have room. Even society is just telling us, oh, you're a black person, you can do this. So you find yourself conditioned to doing that automatically, even though you don't like. You know, I'll be in situations where I'm a black person, but I don't enjoy trap music. But then I'm surrounded by people who enjoy it. Then I'm just like, vibing. But I really don't enjoy it. But then I'm afraid to tell people around me that this is not my thing. Because then if you do, they're like, oh, well, she's an Oreo. You know what I mean?
Oreo.
No, not. Alright, well, very interesting, guys. All good points. All good points. You look like you want to say something.
Another thing I was gonna say, like with vulnerability as well, like we've all been saying it, like from our perspective. I feel like it's sometimes going to those situations. Like I found in places, there's times like there was a conversation a friend and I really needed to have. As soon as they bring it, I'm like, thank God you mentioned it. You know? Because like sometimes we hold back because we are like, oh, how is this person gonna take it, this and that. But sometimes you can just be like, friend, so like these past few weeks have just been an emotional time. They're like, I noticed, but I was afraid to say anything, So I feel like as much as it takes patience, trust and everything, it also takes like, just take that little extra step, go out of your way, just like extend that hand, as Ruth said, like not only to extend the hand to helping someone, but extend the hand, like give someone an opportunity to be there for you. I know it's hard for a lot of people to like ask for help when they need it, myself included, but like I think it's very necessary. It's needed. No man is an island by himself.
God is a God of community. Otherwise, it wouldn't be just.
I just have a question.
Question.
Yes.
question or
Right
statement. Fadi mentioned something about mainly, obviously, Black people not seeking help, going to counselors and stuff because of the stigma attached to mental health and anything in relation to that. And obviously, that includes not being vulnerable. So, what is it that can be said for people in different cultures, mainly from African backgrounds, to understand that seeking for help doesn't really mean that, well, I don't know what people think about it, but it doesn't mean you're abnormal. It's okay to seek for help. Like you said, it's okay to seek for help. We all have areas in our lives where we're really down, or we need someone to lift us up and stuff. But because of what we've been told growing up, and what we know about, well, what we don't know, because if they do, then they'll be seeking help. But what people don't know about mental health and the power of the brain, basically. What can be said, because obviously in school we learn about it, but still there's no numbers, there's no sign of numbers increasing in terms of how many Black people go and seek help from counselors and psychologists and stuff. So what are we doing wrong, or what has been done wrong that people are not seeking for help?
I think the problem is we need to look at it like this. If you can go to, how your health cover expects you to, it covers dentist appointments, and generally when you have a medical cover, your dentist, you are eligible for 2 appointments in the year, free of charge, to go see the dentist. Now, why do we feel like it's okay to go to the dentist, but we can't go to a therapist? We can go to a dentist for a checkup, to get things cleaned, to see how your teeth are aligned and everything, just to see how it is inside, right? And yet going to the therapist is like, no.
I think it also stems from we live I'll just speak from the Burundian culture, because I haven't been to all African cultures, but I think it's sort of like a collective in Africa. It's the whole, we live in that whole what would people say? We have that shaming type of culture. It's the whole for example, even parents, for example, they don't really care, but yes they do care, but for example, if your daughter is wearing a miniskirt, you don't even go the route, why is she wearing a miniskirt, who is she trying to impress? It's the whole, what would so and so say when they see you dressed like that, we everything, a lot of things we do, it doesn't immediately come from, okay, why are you doing that, why is this my child doing this way? It's more of what will people say, so it's we're so focused on how we're perceived by others in the community. We're so focused in the whole we want, it's there's this unspoken competition of wanting to send the better family out there, whereas we don't really focus the fundamentals at home. We look at we don't really focus on the foundation, we just want the finished building, you don't care if there's been cement put down, as long as there's a house just there bent, that's it, that's what we want. So I think what Molly said and what Ruth said, we don't view counseling and mental health as this fundamental thing, because then that would come to this, it comes down to that point of, we're actually not okay. But we work so hard, we strive so hard to put this whole, we are okay, we are good, we are perfect kind of a thing, you know what I mean? So it will take a lot of breaking down all that, because it's a classic example, even if you're going to visit somebody, you're going to some auntie's house, when they're leaving the kids, don't tell nobody our business. Don't tell nobody our business. You're not disclosure. That's the thing, before even kids from a very young age, they are taught they're going to auntie so and so's house, they're told don't do this, don't do that, the whole thing, the classic thing, when your parents said don't eat at that person's house, they'll think you don't have food at home. It goes back to all this how we want to seem to others. We don't really it's not about us ourselves, it's more of what image we're projecting out there. And I think that's the one thing that's really crippling our African communities.
I think it's the question that Molly raised is a much more deeper question. Everything we're talking about is the aftermath.
Surface.
Yeah.
So the much more deeper question is that you gotta ask yourself: the African person is the least known. The black race is the least understood race because we haven't had the opportunity to thrive as a race, to write our own histories, and to be able to understand our own psychology and psyche. So all psychologists or all clinical psychologists, from their experiments to the history of their practices, has nothing to do with the black person.
Right.
So because of that, don't think that like most of our ancestors, they understood themselves, but that culture is very oral. It's been passed down through oral. It hasn't been written, and we don't. If you want to cancel, let's say if you want to cancel or say something that beneficial, that's going to help the psyche or the mental situation of a black person, the first place you will start is to pick up a book that is written by somebody else, and the experiment that has been carried out by somebody else. It's a much more deeper situation. So some of the black people understood that. So they're like, oh, wait a minute. If I have this, I better take it to God. It's not like it doesn't solve it, but it's not a stupid move. Because when they look around in the world,
Yes.
they like, this person doesn't know anything about me. Because what does the person do? So for instance, there are a lot of like psychologists or whatever who travel to African countries or travel to areas predominantly occupied by black people. They sit down and observe and write, but they never ask questions. And even if they do ask questions, the person is likely not to understand the language that the observer speaks.
Yeah.
So he's going to speak in their language. And the moment you pick up something from another language and translate it, some essence is lost in between. That is understood. So it's very, very, and we also didn't have the opportunity, for instance, in terms of religion, we didn't have the opportunity to be able to express ourselves the way we see fit through our religion, the way we see God. So we talk about God right now, but the way we see God, we were taught God by somebody who doesn't understand what our perspective of God is. But we were taught, and we were like, maybe this one is good, and we took it. So unless the black person, I mean, you stop and actually understand what it is to be a black person, what it is to be an African, what it is to be this race, you're not going to be able to have that sort of trust enough for black people to move into like this sort of environment, to seek counseling from people from a particular knowledge that they're already suspicious about. The deep sense of black culture is very suspicious about this sort of knowledge, because they know very well that these people don't even know us. But by virtue of power, so the person with the power can claim he knows or she knows or they know the person without the power. But the person without the power has no any way of affecting how they are known, if you get what I mean. So it's a much more deeper sense, and that is why a lot of black people, instead of maybe they go into this counseling, they take all the problems to God, even though that is not going to be the solution. But when they look at it, they're like, man, I'm not going to go here, because these people are already in their head, whether consciously or unconsciously, they are suspicious of that. See, so that is
So would you say that problem can be solved? A part of that problem, because it's a big problem, like you said, a part of it can be solved by having people from our race position themselves in, counselors, psychologists and stuff. Would Africans be more willing to go seek for help? Because I feel like there's also that limitation of, if an older person is going through a mental problem and they need to seek for help, and then let's say I'm that person in that position, there's a possibility that someone could look at me like, well, she's a child. How is a child supposed to help me with my problem when I've lived my life longer than she's existed? So I feel like there's that element to it as well. But going back to my question, do you think that will help raise the numbers?
Yeah, I think in a Western sense, we live in these countries. For instance, every other people that are lived here. I mean, if you work in aged care, Italians, Chinese, they have a certain degree of like they can demand that we want somebody who speaks Chinese, or we want somebody who speaks Italian to take care of our old people. So if we have that sort of avenues out there, a lot of Africans will feel they'll be more trusting in terms of like helping that situation. That is in a Western sense, because like it's like if you work, I mean, if you guys work, anybody who work in aged care, you realize that is a big gap. Like a lot of black people don't want to grow old and go there, but we tend to like people. If you look at it from outside, it's like, oh, maybe they're not used to it. No, because when you are that vulnerable, that old, you are like, you need somebody. If the person can speak your language, if they look like you, it's much more easier. So I feel like that would help the situation in the Western sense.
It's interesting because doesn't that contradict vulnerability as getting out of your comfort zone?
I think with what he's been saying, like, the whole are they saying that these people don't know us, they don't know our story? Like, I still think it would still be stepping out of your comfort zone. Like, if you are to go see like a black therapist, I think, like, for example, if I was to go and see like a black therapist, I'm still stepping out of my comfort zone in the sense of I'm seeking help. But like, I feel like having a black therapist, like, I'm just gonna say from like an experience, like I recently had an eye infusion, like, and my nurse was black, and like it's just that, I don't know how to say, just that feeling of being amongst your own, like, you feel like, even though you are like so tense, you're holding your shoulders, you feel like you can drop your shoulders, you can relax, in the sense of like, you will be understood. I feel like it kind of touches in hand with the whole trusting, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I was to go see a black therapist and I raise like, certain issues about being a black daughter in a black family, I feel like a black therapist has a higher understanding, they know what expectations families have of their daughters. Whereas in, for example, and I'm not here to discredit the credibility of any therapist or whatever, but I feel like if I was to see a white doctor, there's that cultural clash, like, I might explain what it is that I'm going through. Maybe they have seen other patients like me and they have the same dynamic, and that's where they can draw like, similarities for them to give me tools to help me with that. So like, what he said really does have like a lot of meaning, and a lot of what he said is something that I actually never thought about looking at in that sense. And also, like, while he was saying that, I was thinking back, like, we have a culture sort of like, if an issue, we used to live in quite tight-knit communities. If there was an issue, like, for example, some men will gather together, and talk. I remember, like, I was quite young, but I remember this happening. There was a man that used to, like, abuse his wife and beat his wife. I remember the men of the actual community actually sat him down, like, to talk about that. I guess in their sense, that is some form of counseling, you know what I mean? Like we have a lot, if you look into like African culture, there's a lot of that happens. There's a lot of where aunties sit daughters down to talk, to like, teach them certain skills. As he said, like, our history and our culture is something that has been passed down word of mouth, and many people like in African, like, cultures and backgrounds, we've been so displaced due to wars and family, like just in pursuit of a better life, that we've actually left big parts and big chunks of our cultures behind. We've left big chunks and parts of our cultures in certain places. So what he actually said, like, really, like, just blew my mind. I was like, I never thought of it that way.
Okay. So
can I play devil's advocate?
Yes.
Only because I am a psychology student. I'm not saying you're all wrong. I believe that you're right, because what you're saying is you would like to speak to a black person because they can empathize. because empathy is the big problem here. To put yourself in somebody's shoes and take a mile from those shoes and be like, let me walk in that for a minute and see where you're coming from. Whereas a white person could never fully do that. But I think the problem is viewing therapy in that misconstrued idea. The world now is changing in the sense that therapy is now about you, not about them. And this is where the term person-centered care comes from. I don't know if you guys have heard it in your degrees, but that's what it is, where it's about you. I am here to help you. I am not going to put ideas into your thoughts or into your head or give you ideas of what the world looks like to you. So what I do is I basically sit down, you tell me what you want to tell me. I can't tell you, yeah, now we have to talk about your mother because I think she's, I can't go there. But the conversation has to flow in such a way that I help you identify things, start picking things up and pulling them apart on your own. Because I can't give you the healing. I can't do that. I think that's the problem. If it's a mental issue, yes, I have to give you the process of getting through the depression or the bipolar or whatever. There's a process for that. But where you are unpacking things in your own life, it's not about me fixing you. I just want to clarify that. You are not to be fixed. We're not trying to fix you. Nobody's trying to fix you. You're simply getting things off your chest so you can reflect. Just like what she said, the more you talk about things, the more you go, hang on. I didn't even think I needed that. I didn't even realize that I was doing that. And basically, that person gives you the right. It is your right. You're paying for that. For them to sit there and accommodate you as you offload.
I would also like to say that we've also mentioned on the side that yes, God does help those who help themselves as well. Hence the reason why there is people around us. When God created human beings, the way I understand it, he had an intention for community, for people living together in peace and harmony. Along the way, certain things happened up to this point that we are in. But through God's grace, God working amongst our hearts, we are able to look at someone with a situation that we've never been through and still feel the same empathy because of God's love. That's how God is powerful in a sense. And it's so nice to tell someone so close to you and then give you a hug, like, I'm really sorry this happened. Whereas God can reassure you with this warmth in the Bible and you believing it in the heart, of course, that his promises are sustaining. But there's also beauty of God working through other people. This is what we're saying. Yes, God plays a huge role in all of this, and he's working in his people to make sure that everyone is happy, joyful as time goes progressively. But yeah, that was just for people who say, no, God is gonna answer my prayers. I don't need people. I'm good.
I don't need no one.
Yeah.
Many friends.
Yeah. I think that was a good conversation.
It was
so
informative,
thought-provoking, and do let us know, guys, if there's anything that you'd like to add on, or if whatever thoughts you have. Other than that, I'll just leave the floor to anyone who just wants to add on into anything, just that spice, sugar, before we head off. No? All right. Well, that's it then. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time as we discuss identity as a sub-theme of belonging. Catch up.